I don't have anything more to add, dude. It's they do actually. Obvious. Again, I need to get a better one of these. Like that album. I mean, obviously.
I see To Pimp a Butterfly as being more daring, more ambitious, more unique, lyrically stellar, and while this album does have a philosophy to divulge, Kendrick doesn't skimp on the music on this album.
All they talk about, man, Kendrick, man. Yeah. Kendrick is the best rapper. Man, it's the best album ever made. Da, 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 da. Yep. I don't even think they're really listening and sitting down and saying, this is what this album means.
To Pimp a Butterfly is the best album Kendrick has ever made. No, that doesn't sound right. To Pimp a Butterfly is the greatest album of all time. A bold statement, perhaps? Yes, but I'd say it's a true one. Music has come and gone throughout the generations, with each one being a staple of the particular era they were born in. Michael Jackson's Thriller is an album often personified as the era of the 80s in music. The Chronic is an album made in the 90s, and is characterized as an album which triggered a spark for gangster rap in the mainstream. This kind of thing happens to a lot of music produced. But what happens when an artist looks past that? What happens when an artist creates something so transcendent that it can be looked on and listened to by future generations and beyond? Well, you get something like To Pimp a Butterfly. June 17th, 1987. The date of birth of Kendrick Lamar Duckworth. Born and raised by Paula Oliver and Kenny Duckworth, Kendrick grew up in quite the strange predicament. His family moved from Chicago to California to escape the gang culture that ran rampant around the city. What was strange about that? Well, the city that he moved into was Compton, California.
Detectives say that two men forced their way into the home and demanded money from a 34-year-old man inside. The intruders were armed. One of them shot the man, hitting him multiple times. By the time deputies got there, the man was dead and the suspect had left. They're now looking for any video of them or any witnesses.
Kendrick's early life was rough. Violence, gang culture, drugs. Pirates and Crips were just some of the many gangs that Kendrick was involved in during his early days. And at the young age of 5, Kendrick would witness his first murder right outside of his apartment.
Do I have this right? You saw your first murder when you were 5 years old?
Yes, sir.
What happened?
It was outside my apartment unit. A guy was out there serving his narcotics and somebody rolled up and with a shotgun blew his chest out. We're kids playing in this apartment unit, riding our bikes or whatnot, so immediately it done something to me right then and there to let me know that this is not only something that, I'm looking at, but it's something that maybe I have to get used to.
Growing up with a lifestyle like that would alter the way he perceived the world for the rest of his life. Kendrick attended McNair Elementary School, and this was the place where he was first introduced to the art of poetry. This was also the place where he was introduced to the writings of Martin Luther King and other social activists alike. Kendrick would begin to write poetry of his own, often writing day in and day out, thinking of what he could apply to his writings. Kendrick personified himself as the kid who grew up too fast. And this was definitely true, given the countless years living in the kill-or-be-killed society of Compton. Not long after, Kendrick would attend Centennial High School, a local high school from where he resided. And this was the time where Kendrick would really start dabbling in the art of gang life. This wasn't exactly the fault of Kendrick, however. During this era of Compton, crime rate was at an all-time high. Numbers ranged from a rate of something close to 3,100 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. That is fucking insane. This is a staunch difference compared to other American cities, so we have to compare to something similar, like Los Angeles. The crime rate of LA in the 90s goes short of 1,000 crimes per 100,000 residents, over 3 times less than in Compton. With that taken into account, that left many young teens to indulge in drugs, gang violence, exploitation, or having their life ended from someone who didn't like the color of their shirt. While in high school, Kendrick would continue to take big strides into perfecting his poetic craft, making lyrics for some freestyles that he would rap in front of his friends.
That's why me, your honor. I fuck over these beats with no condom. This ain't rap, it's really a porno. Rewind it back.
He wasn't only inspired by the works of Pac, but also other artists. One that stands out is the work from rapper DMX. Obviously, being involved in gangs would influence what Kendrick would write about. Around this time of writing, Kendrick would befriend a local DJ at his high school named Dave Free, a guy who years later would become the president of Dawg Entertainment, Kendrick's record label. Anthony Tiffith is another important player in this story, who was formerly involved in the gang lifestyle. And around this same time as well, Kendrick would release his first ever mixtape.
It's that Compton-ish. Chevy lights, women get light, bright, hustle at night. Yeah, I had to give it back to the streets on this one.
Initially, Dave suggested for Kendrick to show it to Anthony so that he could be shown the industry. During this era of Kendrick's life, Top Dawg was a neighborhood name, only having J-Rock signed to the label. However, Anthony seemed to be uninterested in the works of a 16-year-old, so it became a challenge to even get him to give it a try. Quote, "One time I posed like I could fix his computer, and the whole time I was playing him the music and just taking apart his computer, and he started paying more attention to me, and I came over and joined the company and brought Kendrick in, and we started grinding from there." In the eyes of Anthony Top Dawg, Kendrick had proven himself to have the skill and ability to be a part of the label. Kendrick would rise above the negatives of Compton life and embrace it for what it was, finally having been given a good hand and a chance to accomplish his dreams. Over the next several years, Kendrick would release 6 full-length projects. He'd made it.
Chevy lights, women get light, bright, hustle at night. Yeah, I had to give it back to the streets on this one. Rolling dice, yeah, gangsta right, my city, hood advice, right.
Kendrick has one of the most impressive discographies out of any rapper ever. He has a total of 4 full-length studio albums, 5 if you want to include the compilation album, Untitled Unmastered, and 6 if you want to include the Black Panther album. Each album he's released has been so much different from the last, with each having a different sound to it to portray these emotions. Despite only a 1-year difference in their respective releases, you can't really compare an album like Section 80 to Good Kid, Mad City. Section 80 is Kendrick's first full-length LP, released on July 2nd, 2011, having a total of 16 tracks. The themes of the album begin to show just from the names of the tracks alone. Fuck Your Ethnicity, ADHD, Ronald Reagan Era, Poe Man Dreams, Kush and Corinthians. The names of the tracks alone paint the story of Kendrick Lamar's outlook on the world at the ripe age of 24. Diversity among the industry, racial strife, high drug tolerance, poverty, the effects of biblical scripture in Kendrick's life. And Kendrick explores each of these topics with such grace and versatility that you can't help but be enraptured in the story that he tells. The album immediately opens up with a no bullshit approach on the previously mentioned track, Fuck Your Ethnicity. The lyrics of the song begin with this campfire narration of Kendrick Lamar with a lower pitched voice, in which he delivers to the audience that he doesn't care about what your ethnicity is. The song has this upbeat, yet at the same time melancholic sound, which melds perfectly with the message of the opening. I don't care about your ethnicity. You're all the same to me. So let's unite and rise above the bitch that is life. The later tracks continue to emulate this message. The track Hole Up has Kendrick saying that his experiences in life have led him to have the mindset of an adult at a very young age. Quote, "As a kid I killed 2 adults. I'm too advanced. I lived my 20s at 2 years old, the wiser man. Truth be told, I'm like 87. The following tracks continue to dive into the theme of a young kid maturing far too quickly, especially on the track ADHD, where Kendrick describes himself as having a non-existent age, due to taking his youth for granted from doing too many adult activities. Both tracks, No Makeup, Her Vice, and Keisha's Song, are dedicated to Kendrick's sister, who sold herself to prostitution. The songs are meant to deliver the message that Kendrick understands the struggles that women go through, and the mental and physical damage that come with it. I'm glad we were able to talk about her vice and her evils. There is an even more important topic I'd like to discuss: the dysfunctional bastards of the Ronald Reagan era. Young men that learn to do everything spiteful. This is your generation. Live fast and die young. Who's willing to explain this story? A quote delivered on the track meant to derive a reaction from the audience. A reaction of realization and a willingness to listen. Being born in the 80s, Kendrick and his generation live under the negative effects of the Reagan administration. The term crack babies isn't just some random term meant to describe drug users who use crack, but a callback to the crack epidemic, which swept the impoverished cities of the United States, in this case, Compton. The epidemic which altered Kendrick's youth and turned it into a drug-ridden dystopia. Who's willing to explain this story? Well, Kendrick is. This album was followed up by Kendrick's 2012 album, Good Kid, Mad City, an album which in just over 7 years has been referred to as one of the greatest hip-hop albums to date. The name of the album has a triple entendre to it, with the most popular interpretation of the MAD acronym meaning mad, in other words, insane or crazy. However, the other two renditions of the meaning dive much deeper. MAAD can either stand for My Angry Adolescence Divided, or also My Angels on Angel Dust, with that interpretation being a reference to cocaine.
Now, just going back to the title of the album, you know, it's a Good Kid, Mad City, right?
Yeah.
What does that acronym MAAD stand for?
It's two minutes. The first one is My Angry Adolescence Divided, and the basic standout meaning is My Angels on Angels Dust.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've been curious about that answer too, man.
That's the reason why I don't smoke.
So you knew somebody on Angel Dust?
No, that was me.
You?
That the guy laced.
Oh.
Reason why I don't smoke, and it's in that album.
Well, who's the motherfucker that laced your shit?
It's in the story. It's in the story.
Did you find out? Did you beat that person's ass?
No, it was just me getting my hands on the wrong thing at the wrong time when I.
The story is centered around Kendrick's adolescent life, with many of the songs diving into the details of his complicated mind state and mentality during that era of his life. The opening track, Shireen, aka Master Splinter's daughter, has Kendrick recalling a night in which he and a young girl he knew named Shireen went to a party and exchanged numbers. Shireen's family, however, is known for being involved in gangbanging, but this doesn't drive him away. Under the influence and having sex on the mind, Kendrick ignores all rationale and drives to her house in his mom's minivan, only to see Shireen outside with two guys in black hoodies, waiting for him. The art of peer pressure progresses the story even farther, telling the story of Kendrick's first real crime, a house robbery, stealing anything of value he could find. And the further down the album you go, the more you realize something. Kendrick has gone through things that not even most adults go through, at a very young age. However, that's the important thing to note. He's still a young teen. He doesn't know how to process and rationalize certain scenarios in his head, and this leads him to get into the trouble that he does on Good Kid, Mad City. Tracks like Good Kid exemplify the exhaustion of the violent lifestyle in Compton, to which it seems like he's lived long enough. He wants to leave. He wants to rise above it. He wants to be the guy who was able to succeed despite his rough upbringing. And he did. But there's one thing that he can't shake off. Compton has consumed his outlook on life. And it'll stay like that for the rest of his life. Almost every song has this small interlude-like skit of a voice recording. These recordings range from his mother calling him to get back home, to his friend's brother being shot dead. Piecing these recordings together gives a story which I've pieced together like this. The voice recording on Shireen shows a prayer being performed by Kendrick and his friends, asking God for forgiveness of the sins that they have and will continue to commit. The final recording on Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe has Kendrick's friend picking him up in a white Toyota so they can freestyle. This leads to the events of Backseat Freestyle. The end recording of The Art of Peer Pressure has Kendrick's friends asking if he's faded from the blunt they gave him, barely realizing that they gave him the one laced with cocaine. After completing the robbery and avoiding the police, Kendrick is driven back home by his friends, still faded from the laced blunt. He tells his mother that he's gonna borrow the van for 15 minutes. The second recording of Shireen has Kendrick's mother calling him, asking him to return back home with the minivan. In the midst of that call, the two hooded guys next to Shireen begin to approach Kendrick. When the two hooded men approach him, they ask him where he's from, and then jump him. Kendrick's mother gives him another call, asking for the van back so she can get to her appointment. The Mad City recording has Kendrick's friends giving him a bottle of alcohol and telling him to not worry about what happened last night. In the swimming pools recording, Kendrick's friends throw out the idea of getting revenge on the guys who jumped Kendrick the other night. While shooting them up, Kendrick's friend Dave is shot and killed. Kendrick and his friends ask themselves what to do after the death of Dave, and Kendrick screams that he's tired of it all. While grieving, they get approached by an older woman who recites them the same prayer that was told in the beginning of the album. The voice recordings of Real have Kendrick's father giving his condolences to Dave's death, and Kendrick's mother telling him that Top Talk called. She tells him to use his experiences in Compton to make music, and to give back to the city, the city, the city, the city.
Hey, Soundwave, turn this shit up, nigga. Turn this shit up. Soundwave, turn this shit up, nigga. Tell me who the bitch nigga hating on me. Jumping on my dick, but this dick ain't free. To Pimp A Butterfly, another classic CD. Ghetto lullaby for everyone they MC. Blow, 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 blow. Nigga
talking that R.I.P. My diligence is only meant to write your eulogy.
You remember your first interview you did up here?
Nah, I don't. I know y'all was on me, Charlamagne, talking about.
But it was so early that we didn't even have. It didn't even go on air. It was on a webisode.
Yeah.
It was on a webisode, and I just remember back then I was like, this kid is gonna be something. And we were having a conversation the other day about who are the best lyricists and best rappers. And I mentioned you, and Charlamagne was like, I don't think he has enough in yet. Do you still believe that?
Yeah, because you said he was one of the greatest of all
That's how I
time. The man
feel.
only got 2 albums. Give him some time.
But just hearing him snap and some of the things that he says,
he gets busy, but give him
it's
time.
Things that most artists, most MCs
I
are
don't
not
think
even
think
there.
they do y'all no favors when they automatically put y'all with the GOATs already. Give y'all some time.
I hear it,
of
though.
course,
I can hear it.
Of course, you gotta have that time, and that's the thing that I say with the word classic, and instant classic album. Me putting To Pimp a Butterfly out, you hear the speculation of kids saying that all over again prior to when we put Good Kid, Mad City out, and I always told them, listen to the music a few times, man, before we start throwing words out like that, even when it's on my behalf. Because I want you to live with it, 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 live with it.
The reception of Good Kid, Mad City was an astounding feat for Kendrick, rising up the ranks into what many artists only dreamed of. In just 1 year of its release, it sold over 1 million copies. But now it's 2015, and many fans were anticipating the release of his next project. March 15th, 2015. To Pimp a Butterfly was released. To Pimp a Butterfly mixes the writings of consciousness with the sound of jazz-influenced rap to create a new type of sound. Jazz rap has been around for decades, but T-Pap applies it in a different way, giving the sound a crisp and mixed mellow voice, and splicing it over saxophones, bass guitars, and synth keys to create many of the songs on the record. As of today, To Pimp a Butterfly has given him multiple awards and nominations for the greatest album of the year. But what exactly made people love this album so much? What makes T-Pap resonate with so many people? What makes people call it the greatest album of all time? Well, let's answer this question together. Let's get into the crux of this video and take a deep dive into the inner workings of To Pimp a Butterfly. The album opens with the track Wesley's Theory. This song establishes the story and theme of the overall album, and gives the audience an idea of what they're getting into. The intro of the song starts with Joseph Leonberg, delivering a phrase which metaphorically describes who Kendrick and many other Compton rappers go through when they break into the industry. They get exploited by the industry plants, and effectively pimped for their own benefits. Hence the phrase, "Are you really who they idolize?" The verses are split between 2 different personas, verse 1 being in the perspective of a black artist, and verse 2 being in the perspective of Uncle Sam, the overwhelming American industry, the extreme side of capitalistic ideas, which value money more than anything else. The next track is the first of 2 interludes, titled For Free. This song involves 2 people which can be interpreted in 2 very different ways, with one being literal and another being metaphorical. In a literal sense, this song plays as Kendrick describing to a girl that he's not willing to please her in her materialistic ways, with the intro of the song alone having the girl yelling at Kendrick to continue to satisfy her money-driven lifestyle. In a metaphorical sense, however, the song goes much deeper. Kendrick represents the black artist in the industry, and the woman represents the standards of the industry. Quote, "I need that Brazilian wavy 28-inch, you playin'." Or in other words, the industry wants the average black artist to continue to produce more and more, until they are wrung dry of everything they have. And once they do, they move on to the next one. The track King Kunta is a reference to the character in the novel Roots, the saga of an American family, Kunta Kinte, a black adolescent from the 18th century, who was captured and sent into slavery. The story of Kinte is characterized as being very resistant to the constant attempts of the slave masters, assimilating him to be more white, choosing rather to take punishment while staying true to himself, than live the rest of his life in a lie. And this is exactly what is presented in King Kunta. Kendrick was raised in his hometown from where he resided. Like Kinte, Kendrick was taken into a foreign land, a place where he knew absolutely nothing about. However, he would soon begin to adapt, while simultaneously choosing to stay true to his hometown of Compton, instead of switching to what the industry wanted him to. Track 4 is titled Institutionalized, which takes a staunch turn from the confident stance of King Kunta. By its definition, being institutionalized refers to being so used to living in a certain way, where it becomes the only thing you know, and this song serves as the realization of Kendrick's roots. He's lived in Compton for far too long, that it's all he knows. His past haunts him. The crime, the gang violence, the hardcore drug use, all of it still has living space in Kendrick's mind, and it eats away at him every day. In his mind, he's still living in Compton, and he still has it in him to continue that life. The track These Walls represents the walls of a woman's vagina, the walls of a cell, and the walls of his mind. The opening line of the track starts by saying this, quote, "I remember you as conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same." This phrase alone tells you an important thing regarding the song and the actions that Kendrick has taken. He uses the influence he has to get girls to have sex with him, and in hindsight, Kendrick sees this as a misuse of his influence. The story presented in this song follows Kendrick and a younger mother, who has the father of her children in prison. The man was in prison for killing Kendrick's friend on the first verse of Sing About Me. Kendrick is struck with revenge, wanting to get back at the guy who killed his friend, so he spends the song attempting to hook up with his baby mama, and eventually does. The resentment he has for that man and everyone else who's wronged him eventually forces Kendrick to look at himself, and it begins to take a toll on his mentality, a resentment that turns into a deep depression. And this leads on to the events of the 6th track, You. The track opens with screaming, as stated by the ending line of the previous track. The first verse has Kendrick speaking to himself in a very negative way, saying that he despises himself and calls himself a fucking failure. Every negative situation that he's had in Compton is still held within him. The death of his friends, not being able to give back all the time. It all holds weight in him, and this continues with the second part of the song, in which a sobbing Kendrick begins to question his entire existence and devotion to who he is. He survived Compton, but he couldn't bring everyone along with him. His career gets in the way of his family, and it leads him to feel solely responsible for what happens in Compton from when he left.
3 of my homeboys that summertime, was murdered. You know, close ones too, not just somebody that I hear about. These are people I grew up with. So it all psychologically, it messes your brain up because you live in this life, you know what I'm saying? But you still have to face realities of this. I got to get back off that tour bus and go to these funerals, you know, and go talk to my moms and talk to their aunties, the kids that you know, lost their lives.
All Right is a song about picking yourself back up and looking at the brighter side. Taking the stance that, while you may have it rough, you must look past your previous transgressions and improve yourself as a person. He references the struggles and complications with the law, and assures himself and the audience of one thing. Speaking directly to them, he says, "We gon' be alright." This song is also the first song where he mentions Lucy, in this case, Lucifer. That concept would be expanded upon in the second interlude of the album, For Sale, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest interludes I've ever heard. This song builds upon the concept of the For Free interlude. However, in this track, he personifies the music industry as an attractive woman with an enticing pull, promising to provide aid for his family back home and riches beyond his wildest dreams. All he needs to do to receive this is to sign the contract, or in other words, have sex with her. Kendrick understood that the evils of the industry were all around him, so he went running for answers, until he came home. This leads us to the most important track on the album, Mama. This track runs as Kendrick realizing that he must embrace where he came from, instead of trying to look past it. All of the dark memories of his past eat away at him every day, so he sees only one way to overcome them. He needs to come back home. What is home? Well, for Kendrick, that's Compton. It's his African roots. It's Kendrick. His verses in this song emanate a feeling that Kendrick is unable to describe. A feeling of fulfillment that he only felt while in Compton. The chorus has Kendrick's friends, family, the residents of Compton, all yearning for him to come back to where he came from. The second verse has a constant repetition of the phrase, "I know everything." And this isn't just a lazy way of filling out the second verse. It's meant to tell the audience something. Kendrick felt as though he knew everything once he left the streets. He felt that his success had taught him that he was able to make it in the industry, and therefore the outside world. He knows wisdom. He knows bad religion. He knows good karma. He knows everything. But the day he came home, he knew nothing. He no longer understood his roots. He had been away from Compton for far too long. and now he was completely lost. On Kendrick's trip to South Africa, he meets a young boy who resembles many of the features of Kendrick himself. He speaks to Kendrick about the problems facing his life, and how it makes him feel about the world itself. Negatively. But he doesn't feel like involving Kendrick in any of his problems because he's too big for that. He's a big shot celebrity who wouldn't understand. He tells Kendrick to look around, to absorb the environment around him, so he can get a clear picture of what he was born from. He tells Kendrick that everything he learned about the world and thought was true was a lie, but he empathizes with the struggles that Kendrick is currently in. The kid believes that Kendrick is living a lie. But with all that being said, he wants to offer Kendrick advice. He says this, quote, "I can attempt to enlighten you without frightening you. If you resist, I'll back off quick, go catch a flight or two. But if you pick destiny over rest and peace, then be an advocate, and tell your homies especially to come back home." The 10th track on this album is Hood Politics, a track where Kendrick takes it back to a time when Compton was all he knew. Kendrick discusses himself, the politics surrounding America, and the industry he's currently in. This album discusses the misconceptions of the hood that are perceived by the public, with many of the news stations looking to capture the many crimes on camera, to paint a picture of the ghetto in a certain light. There's one line that I really want to dive into, and the line says, "Obama say what it do." This line has a very underlying meaning to it. Not only does it call back to when Obama said what it do, when speaking to the African crowd, but it also refers to the way Kendrick feels about not only politicians, but black politicians specifically. Many politicians can be perceived as self-serving, but Kendrick sees Obama in a different perspective. No matter how black Obama may be, he's still a politician, and he still remains to be there when the rest of America gets fucked over. How Much a Dollar Really Cost is an anecdotal piece from Kendrick's experience with the homeless man in South Africa. The homeless man approaches Kendrick while pumping up his car and asks him for $1. Kendrick denies the man, mainly off the suspicion that the guy's gonna use it for crack. The man begs and pleads with Kendrick, telling Kendrick that if there's one thing he's defeated, it's temptation. Kendrick denies the man and closes his car. The man stares back at Kendrick in disappointment, to which Kendrick takes it as disrespect. The man then asks Kendrick if he's ever read Exodus 14, a section in biblical scripture which refers to being humble in the eyes of God. By virtue of saying that, Kendrick begins to feel guilty and resentment towards the man, but still attempts to justify his reasons for not giving him the $1 in his head. He smells like alcohol. The man's walking with a stumble. But the man ends the conversation with this, quote, "Know the truth, it'll set you free. You're looking at the Messiah, the Son of Jehovah, the higher power, the choir that spoke the word, the Holy Spirit, the nerve of Nazareth. And I'll tell you just how much $1 cost. The price of having a spot in heaven. Embrace your loss. I am God." Track 12 is titled Complexion, and the meaning lies all in the name of the song. It doesn't matter the complexion of your skin. The only thing that defines a person is who they portray themselves as. And this is a perfect lead into the 13th track, The Blacker the Berry, which is by far the most controversial piece he's released as of now. This track serves as a message to all people who claim to be against the white on black violence. Kendrick more specifically refers to people who say that, yet also indulge in violence themselves. The line, "I'm the biggest hypocrite" of 2015 acts as a wake-up call to those people, to get them to reevaluate what their message is. Kendrick attempts to deliver a message to the audience that morality is arbitrary to whatever person you ask. But regardless of it all, equality among people should be respected regardless of personal opinions. Instead of attempting to erase black culture and assimilate them into their own, Kendrick emphasizes that diversity is an important thing to have, not only for the richness of the country's culture, but also the people who hold that culture. And this is a concept that is somewhat delved a little deeper in the 14th track, You Ain't Gotta Lie, a track in which Kendrick makes an example of people who try to be somebody that they're not. And it's a phrase that he repeats in the chorus of the song. You don't have to lie to kick it, just be you. Don't try to be somebody else, just be I. And this is the exact theme of the 15th track, I. I is a track which completely juxtaposes the perspective of the track You. Instead of self-hate, Kendrick has learned to look past it and realize that not everything is able to be in his control, and is therefore not his fault. Kendrick is all about self-love, being stated very bluntly in the chorus of the track. He's seen enough in his life that all he can try to achieve is to love himself. In the album version of I, Kendrick has an offstage argument with people who interrupt his performance. This is meant to symbolize the disunity of the black youth, and is supported by Kendrick mentioning the many people who were killed by the life of the hood. And now we finally reach the closing track of the album, track 16, Mortal Man. The album closes off with just one question. When shit hits the fan, will you still be a fan? A question that Kendrick not only has for the fans listening to him worldwide, but specifically to the kids that look up to him in Compton. Quote, "I felt that pressure in Compton, looking at the responsibility I have over these kids. The world started turning into a place where so many people were getting no justice. You gotta step up to the plate. Mortal Man is not me saying, I can be your hero. Mortal Man is me questioning, do you really believe in me to do this? Kendrick makes a reference to Mandela on the chorus of the song, seeing it as the torch passing of the late Nelson Mandela, a man who fought for social equality. Kendrick strives to want to continue his legacy, but he can't stress enough that he's still a mortal man capable of making mistakes. Throughout Kendrick's career, he's tried to emulate the feeling that he was able to make it, despite the effects of Compton lifestyle. He's preached this in all of his mixtapes and albums, but this album takes a staunch realization that he wasn't able to fully escape it. And that's not a bad thing. He's come to understand that it isn't bad to embrace where you came from. It isn't bad to appreciate your roots. It isn't bad to be a mortal man. At the very end of Mortal Man, Kendrick has a talk with Tupac, one of his greatest inspirations as not only an artist, but as a black man. After Kendrick finishes speaking to Tupac, he delivers him one final poem to read that his friend wrote. The poem metaphorically describes the process of metamorphosis. In other words, the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, a symbolic meaning of being set free, and finally spreading your wings into the open world. While young, Kendrick compares himself to a caterpillar, an organism which eats away at the environment around him in order to survive. This isn't only meant to describe him, but other people as well. People who were affected by the hood. Attempting to break free, Kendrick begins the process of building his cocoon, which institutionalizes him. However, when he's in the cocoon, many of the other caterpillars begin to seek ways of pimping out what is to be for their own benefit, milking the success and talent that it has, all for themselves. Still in the cocoon, he's trapped, unable to respond to the leeches that bind themselves for profit. However, the cocoon allows for new ideas to take place and be brought out once it finally reaches its potential. Finally ready, the caterpillar breaks free from the walls of the cocoon, emerging as the butterfly that it always seeked to be. Now free, the butterfly reveals concepts to the caterpillar in which it never thought of before. Finally understanding each other, the butterfly and caterpillar set aside their differences and come out united. Although the butterfly and caterpillar are completely different, they are one and the same. This poem alone is what separates this album from any other. Instead of telling the audience what to think, it tells the audience how Kendrick thinks, by offering a perspective on both sides. Kendrick has lived as both the caterpillar and the butterfly, the young boy who was taught to eat the rich, but in the process, strove to be the rich. And Kendrick does this to portray the simple message. Although we are completely different, we are one and the same. And that's why I think that To Pimp a Butterfly is the greatest album of all time. I remember you as conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same, abusing my power, full of resentment. Resentment that turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in the hotel room. I didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me. So I went running for answers. Until I came home. But that didn't stop survivor's guilt. Going back and forth trying to convince myself the stripes I earned. Or maybe how A1 my foundation was. But while my loved ones was fighting the continuous war back in the city, I was entering a new one. A war that was based on apartheid and discrimination. Made me want to go back to the city to tell the homies what I learned. The word was respect. Just because you wore a different gang color than mine, doesn't mean I can't respect you as a black man. Forgetting all the pain and hurt we cause each other in these streets. If I respect you, we unify and stop the enemy from killing us. But I don't know. I'm no mortal man. Maybe I'm just another nigger.